Have you ever met someone who changed your life? Not with grand gestures, but with quiet kindness. This is the story of a struggling single dad, a wild Mustang, and a woman who showed up in the rain, hiding a truth no one saw coming. It's not just about horses or heartache, it's about second chances, the power of gentle love, and what happens when a billionaire chooses to disappear and find something worth staying for. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, if stories of hope, healing, and humanity speak to your heart, consider subscribing to this channel. We share real, meaningful stories, the kind that stay with you long after they're told. Now take a deep breath, because a struggling single dad trained a Mustang to help his son, then a billionaire came looking for it, is about to begin. The wind moved like a whisper through the brittle grass, carrying with it the smell of old dust and November's regret. Luke Mallory stood on the back porch of the weather-beaten house he called home, coffee in one hand, eyes fixed on the horizon like it might offer answers to questions he no longer asked out loud. Beyond the fence, their pasture stretched wide and wild, as if refusing to forget the land it used to be before time and bills and tragedy claimed it. A rusted swing set leaned like a tired sentinel near the barn, and somewhere inside the house, his 10-year-old son, Ethan, was probably struggling to button his flannel shirt with fingers that didn't work the way they used to. Luke took another sip of the bitter brew. It was burnt, but it was warm. The screen door creaked behind him. "Dad?" Ethan's voice was small, unsure. Luke turned. His boy was already dressed for the day, his chair beside him, the wheels newly polished, though the left one still squeaked. "You ready?" Luke asked, setting the cup down on the railing. Ethan nodded, but there was a pause in it. "You working?" "Today." Luke hesitated, just long enough for the boy to notice. He crouched down, level with his son's eyes. "I'm not going in today." Ethan's brows furrowed. "You got fired, didn't you?" Luke smiled softly. "Smart kid, too smart. Let's just say Mr. Donaldson's idea of flexible hours ran out of stretch." "You missed shifts again." "Yeah." Luke brushed his hand over Ethan's hair, still messy from sleep. "But you needed me. That's not something I'll ever apologize for." They didn't talk much after that. They didn't need to. Luke hoisted Ethan into the truck, chair and all, and they drove to town for groceries. Same old roads, same old looks. People meant well, mostly. But pity wore a scent of discomfort in a small town. It lingered even when no one spoke it out loud. At the checkout counter, the clerk, Debbie, kind-eyed and eternally sympathetic, slid the items across the scanner slowly. Her smile stretched. "Tight. Rough week, Luke?" He managed a chuckle. "When has it not been?" She dropped her gaze, then tapped in a discount code without saying anything. Luke pretended not to notice, but he did, and it stung. Back home, the air had turned sharper, the sky grayer. Ethan asked to sit outside for a while, bundled in blankets. Watching the wind move the dry weeds, Luke let him be and headed to the barn to stack firewood, another chore on a list that never seemed to shrink. That's when he heard it. A sound, soft, irregular, like hooves crunching through frost-covered leaves. Then the snort of breath. Low, nervous. Luke straightened slowly. Through the open barn door, his eyes caught the shimmer of movement out near the edge of the pasture. A horse. Not just any horse. A Mustang. Its coat dappled grey and white, muscles, lean under a veil of dirt, eyes wide and wild. It limped slightly, favouring its front right leg. But even wounded, it moved with a kind of raw, unfiltered grace that took Luke's breath away. He stepped forward cautiously, boots crunching in rhythm with his pulse. The horse froze, ears twitching. Luke paused, then slowly crouched, making himself smaller. "Easy," he murmured, as if the word might carry more than sound, like it might carry a promise. From the porch, Ethan's voice called out, "Dad, there's a horse." Luke didn't look back. "I see it, buddy." It took nearly an hour to coax the creature close enough to the fence. Another 30 minutes before it let Luke touch its flank. He found no brand, no halter, nothing but dried blood near the leg wound and a heartbeat fast as thunder under its skin. They kept it in the back corral, gave it water, hay. Ethan named it Hope without hesitation, because it showed up when we needed it, he said simply. Luke didn't argue. He just looked at the boy, his legs wrapped in fleece, his eyes brighter than they'd been in weeks, and felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't dared feel in a long time, possibility. That night, as the wind howled against the eaves and firelight danced in the hearth, Ethan fell asleep on the couch, a book about horses open on his chest. Luke sat beside him, tracing the lines of his face, smaller now than they had been before the accident. Thinner. "I'll find a way," Luke whispered, "to no one and to everyone. I'll find a way to give you something more than this." Outside, in the stillness of their quiet land, hope shifted in the dark, still wild, still wary, but home. The morning broke in quiet layers, silver mist hugging the pasture like a secret not yet told. Frost glazed the fence posts, glittering faintly under the waking sun. The world felt still, but not empty. Something had shifted. Luke stepped outside, with a cup of reheated coffee, his breath misting in front of him as he scanned the field. There, toward the back corral, stood the Mustang. It hadn't bolted overnight. Hope was still there. The horse's head rose as Luke approached, ears tilting forward, then sideways, unsure. A full 20 feet separated them, but it felt narrower than the night before, the space between trust and fear. Luke stopped near the fence, leaned his arms on the cold wood. "Well, you stayed," he said quietly. "That's something." Hope didn't respond, of course, but she didn't run either. Her wounded leg quivered slightly as she shifted her weight, still favoring the right front hoof. Luke made a mental note to check it, slowly, when she'd let him. Behind him, the screen door slammed. Ethan's wheelchair crunched across the gravel path. "Is she okay?" the boy asked, pulling a blanket tighter around his shoulders. His breath puffed out in quick clouds. "She's skittish," Luke said, "but she's not running. That's a good sign." Ethan watched the horse for a moment, his eyes wide and soft. "She looks sad," Luke blinked. "Sad?" "Yeah. Like she's trying to be brave, but she's still scared." Luke swallowed hard, not from the cold. His son had a way of seeing things, cutting past the noise, straight into the truth. Maybe it was because of what he'd been through, maybe because he'd had to grow up faster than most boys ever should. They spent the next hour near the corral, not pushing too close. Just being there. Luke placed a bucket of fresh water near the edge, added more hay. Hope watched him with one eye, cautious but curious. Ethan held out an apple on his lap, his hand steady. Hope didn't move. "That's okay," Ethan said softly. "She just needs more time." Luke smiled. "Smart man. I learned from you." The wind picked up a bit, carrying the scent of cedar from the far tree line. The day settled into its rhythm. Chores needed doing. Calls needed making. Luke still hadn't figured out where his next paycheck would come from, but for the first time in a long time, urgency didn't feel like a noose. It felt manageable, because now there was a different kind of task at hand. Rebuilding trust with a creature that mirrored so much of his own brokenness. By midday, Hope had taken a few steps toward the fence when Luke stood near. Still hesitant, but progress. Her eyes tracked every movement, not with panic, but with calculation. "She's learning you won't hurt her," Ethan said. "Yeah, and I'm learning I've got more patience than I thought." Later that afternoon, Luke called a friend from his rodeo days, Benny Carver, who now worked with wild horse rescues out west. "Mustang, you say?" Benny said over the line. "Unbranded. Nothing on her." Luke confirmed. "She's limping, but not lame. Smart, though, you can see it in her eyes." "Sounds like a challenge," Luke chuckled. "I don't know what I'm doing, Benny. I'm not a horse whisperer." "No," Benny replied, "but you're a father. That counts for more." Luke hung up with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. He wasn't giving hope. Up, not to a rescue, not to anyone. That evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the field in gold, something remarkable happened. Hope stepped closer to Ethan. Luke had been raking hay nearby, not even watching when Ethan called out, his voice low but full of awe. "Dad!" Luke turned. Hope stood just a few feet from the boy, sniffing the air. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. He held out his open palm again, this time with nothing in it, just a silent offering. Hope leaned in, tentative, breath warm in the cold air. Her muzzle touched Ethan's fingers. Just for a second, it was enough. Luke felt something crack open in his chest, not pain, not even joy. Something quieter, something holy. Afterward, they didn't talk much. Ethan went inside to read. Luke stayed out by the corral, watching Hope as she settled near the fence. Her body relaxed for the first time. When he finally returned to the house, Ethan looked up from his book. "Do you think she's meant to be here?" he asked. Luke paused by the doorway. "I don't know." Ethan smiled faintly. "I think she came to help us." Luke didn't answer right away, but in his heart the thought landed like a seed in warm soil. Maybe she had. The rain had come in quietly, as it often did in late November. First a hush in the wind, then a soft patter on the barn roof, then a steady drumbeat that soaked through coat collars and made the world feel smaller, lonelier. Luke had just finished, fixing a broken hinge on the pasture gate, when he saw the truck. A dark blue pickup, not local, not familiar, angled awkwardly on the side of the county road, its hazard lights blinking weakly through the drizzle. The driver's side door was open. No movement. He glanced toward the house. Ethan was inside, warm, safe. Luke jogged toward the road, boots kicking up mud, breath coming hard in the damp air. As he neared the truck, he saw her, a woman, late 30s maybe. She stood in the ditch, crouched beside the front wheel, one hand pressed to her temple like she was dizzy or in pain. Her hair clung to her face in wet strands, and her coat, more stylish than practical, was soaked through. "Hey!" Luke called out, slowing his pace. "You okay?" She turned toward him, startled. Her eyes were sharp, green, or maybe grey, hard to tell in the rain, but something in them flickered. Not fear exactly, something more complicated. I think I hit something," she said, voice trembling. "I swerved. The wheel, it's not moving." Luke took a careful step into the ditch, mud squelching beneath his boots. "Let me take a look." She moved aside, still holding her head. "Sorry, I didn't see the puddle until, well, too late." "Puddles out here hide worse than just water," he muttered, already crouching beside the front tire. "Ruts, rocks, old iron fence posts. This road's half forgotten." She gave a weak smile. "Seems like I'm not the first to find that out the hard way." The damage wasn't terrible. The tire had slid into a rut and bent part of the rim, locking it against the caliper. Drivable? Maybe, with a bit of coaxing. "You from around here?" he asked, standing up and wiping his hands on his jeans. "No," she said quickly, "just passing through." There was something clipped in the way she said it, like a door closing. Luke didn't press. "I can get you to town," he offered. "There's a shop, or at least a man with enough tools to pretend it's one." She hesitated. "I'd rather stay with the truck. You'll be soaked in another 10 minutes. And out here, cell service comes and goes like deer." Still, she hesitated. Luke softened his voice. "I'm not offering anything but a dry porch and a hot mug of coffee. You'll be safe." That did it. She nodded slowly, like the weight of the rain was finally getting to her. Okay. The ride back to the house was quiet. She barely spoke, only glanced around now and then, as if trying to memorize the trees or find something she'd lost. Luke didn't ask her name, and she didn't offer it. He figured they'd get to that in time, if at all. Ethan met them at the door, wide-eyed. "Who's that?" "A traveler with a stubborn truck," Luke said, brushing his boots on the mat. "She'll be staying till the rain lets up." The woman crouched beside Ethan. "Hi there, what's your name?" "Ethan," he said shyly. She smiled, and Luke saw it, the crack in her posture, the softening in her shoulders. She looked genuinely moved. "Well, Ethan," she said, "you got the best smile I've seen all day." He blushed and wheeled back into the kitchen. Luke handed her a towel and pointed toward the fireplace. "Sit, warm up. I'll start some coffee." She didn't argue. She didn't ask for anything more. But she looked around the room as if it surprised her. Modest, clean, quiet, family photos on the wall, tools on the counter, a home built from necessity, not perfection. She held the towel close to her face. "You live here alone? Just me and Ethan? No wife?" Luke hesitated. "She passed, car accident, a few years back." Her eyes met his, something like regret swimming in them. "I'm sorry," she said, and this time her voice was quieter, real. "Thank you." They didn't speak for a while. The coffee brewed. Rain tapped on the windows. The fire cracked softly. Finally, she asked, "Do you believe in signs?" Luke raised an eyebrow. "Like fate? Like things showing up when you need them, or people?" He thought of hope, of Ethan's smile this morning when the Mustang touched his hand for the first time. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "Sometimes." She turned her eyes back to the fire. "So do I." Hope didn't like the rope. She didn't like the halter either, or the gentle coaxing, or the brush Luke held like an offering of peace. Her eyes flared wide whenever he approached, nostrils twitching, legs ready to bolt. But she didn't run. Not anymore. That, Luke knew, was progress. 3 days had passed since the rain. Clara had driven back into town that same afternoon, claiming she'd find someone to help with her truck. She hadn't said when or if she'd be back. But her coffee mug still sat in the dish rack, and Ethan had left a folded napkin on the kitchen table with the words, "Come visit Hope again soon." She hadn't returned it. Now, under the low morning sun, Luke moved slowly in the round pen, feet crunching in the thin dust, rope loose in his hands. Ethan watched from his wheelchair near the fence line, bundled in his favorite blue hoodie. "She looks calmer today," the boy said. "She's thinking," Luke replied. "Learning the rules, trying to decide if she trusts me." "She should." "You're good," Luke smiled faintly. "She doesn't know that yet." He took another step forward. Hope's ears flicked, muscles tight. He didn't push, just stood. Let her see him, let her breathe. This was how it had been after the accident. After Ethan woke up in the hospital, blinking at the ceiling, not understanding why his legs didn't move. Luke had sat at his side just like this, still quiet, offering something wordless, "I'm not going anywhere." Hope took a hesitant step forward. 1, then 2. "There you go," Luke murmured. "That's it." Then, like a switch had flipped, she turned, one sharp movement, and bolted. Not far, just a circle around the pen. Dust kicked up behind her, then she slowed again, paused, glanced back at Luke with wary eyes. "She's testing you," Ethan said. "Right? Probably. She'll come back." Luke turned toward him. "How do you know?" Ethan shrugged. "Because she wants to." The simplicity of it made Luke laugh, a dry, true sound he hadn't heard from himself in a long while. "You ever think about becoming a horse trainer?" Ethan grinned. "Only every day." The Mustang returned to her mark. This time, she didn't shy away from the rope. Luke let it dangle in front of her, not touching. Just an invitation. And then, as if to mark the moment, they heard the crunch of gravel from the driveway. A car. Clara. Luke looked up just in time to see her step out of a small rental sedan, her boots new but dusty, her coat less stylish, more sensible. She waved once, uncertain, and began walking toward them. Ethan lit up like a lantern. "She came back!" Luke tried to suppress the warmth rising in his chest. He failed. Clara leaned against the fence, watching the horse with the same intent focus as Ethan. "She's beautiful," she said. "She's a handful," Luke replied. "But she's trying. Aren't we all?" Luke looked at her, then back at Hope. "Some of us run faster." Clara didn't answer. Her hands were buried deep in her coat pockets, shoulders tight. "Want to help?" Luke asked. Clara blinked. "Help?" "Stand here," he said, gesturing to the fence beside. "Ethan, hold this rope. Just don't move." She took it with both hands like it might break. Hope eyed her, ears twitching. For a moment nothing happened. The world felt perfectly still. And then Hope stepped forward, 2 feet, 3, closer to Clara than she'd ever come to anyone but Luke or Ethan. Then Ethan, with the excitement of a boy who believed all things were possible, said, "I want to try." Luke turned. "What do you mean?" "I want to ride her." Silence fell like snow. Luke looked at the boy, his boy, in that chair, all hope and stubbornness. "She's not ready yet." "I am." Clara's eyes moved between them, sensing the weight of what this meant. A boy who had lost so much, asking to believe again. "Maybe just a little," she said softly. "You'll help him, right?" Luke hesitated. Then he nodded. Together, they lifted Ethan from the chair. Hope stood still, to everyone's amazement. Luke kept his hand on her halter, whispering steady words, while Clara helped steady Ethan's body against the saddle blanket. And for the briefest moment, it worked. Ethan sat tall, legs dangling, wind tugging at his hoodie. He laughed, clear and true, until Hope startled at a gust of wind and jolted sideways. Ethan slipped. Luke caught him mid-fall, tumbling to the ground with the boy in his arms. Hope skittered away but didn't bolt. Ethan gasped, blinking in. "Shock! I'm okay," he shouted quickly before Luke or Clara could panic. But Luke wasn't looking at Ethan. He was staring at the dirt, heart racing, arms trembling. He'd almost lost him. Again. Clara knelt beside them. "He's all right. Look, he's okay." Luke held Ethan tighter. "It only takes 1 second. 1 second and everything changes." "Or 1 second to prove something's possible," Clara whispered. Luke looked at her. In her eyes, he saw no fear, just understanding. She wasn't running anymore either. The days grew shorter and the mornings colder. By early December, frost painted the edges of the windows, and the fire in the living room rarely died out. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm again, but it was different now. Not just because of Hope, not just because Ethan was smiling more, but because Clara kept coming back. She never stayed long. An hour here, a few minutes there, always with the same excuse. "I was just passing by." But Luke had lived long enough to know when someone wasn't just passing. That afternoon, Clara stood in the barn doorway, watching as Luke brushed down Hope after another quiet training session. The Mustang was less jumpy now, less wary. She followed Luke in slow, deliberate steps, as if choosing to trust him more each day. "You ever train horses before?" Clara asked, folding her arms against the cold. Luke gave a half smile. "A few lifetimes ago." She tilted her head. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer right away. He focused on the gentle circular motion of the brush against Hope's coat. It wasn't that he didn't want to answer. It was that he hadn't spoken of those days in a long time, and never to someone like her. "I used to ride rodeo," he said finally. "Bronc and bull. Made decent money before I got smart." Clara raised an eyebrow. "You quit?" Luke shrugged. "I met someone, fell in love, realized life on the road wasn't the kind of man I wanted to be for her. Or for the kid I didn't know I'd have yet. Ethan's mom." He nodded. "Her name was Jenna, sweet, stubborn, too good for me by half." Clara stepped forward slowly, leaning against the stall post. "What happened to her?" The brush slowed in Luke's hand. Car accident 4 years ago last month. Ice on the road coming back from a doctor's appointment. Ethan was with her. Clara's breath caught. Is that... He was in the back seat, took the brunt of the impact on the left side. Broke his back. Jenna didn't make it. Silence settled between them. The kind of silence that doesn't ask to be filled. I'm so sorry, she said softly. Luke nodded, but his eyes stayed on Hope. You learn how to carry things differently after a while. Doesn't mean they get lighter, just means your arms stop shaking as much. He looked over at her. And you? You don't talk much about your past either. Clara hesitated. For a heartbeat, Luke thought she might deflect again. Say something vague or clever and change the subject. But she surprised him. My sister, she said, 2 years younger. Her name was Lydia. The name came with a weight. Luke heard it, felt it. She died last spring, Clara went on, voice quieter now. Cancer, fast, unfair, the kind that doesn't care how much money you throw at it. Luke said nothing, just listened, just stood still. She loved horses, Clara added. She volunteered at a sanctuary in Wyoming for years. After she passed, I didn't know what to do with myself. I had money, homes, people who worked for me, but no one who knew what that loss meant. No one who didn't try to fix it with dinner parties or therapists or spa retreats. Her laugh was bitter but not angry. I got in my car one day and drove until the city was behind me. I didn't know where I was going, just kept going. Ended up here. Luke looked at her, really looked at her, and saw more than just expensive boots and the quiet ache in her eyes. He saw someone who had been running, like Hope, like him. You found us, he said. Clara nodded. And I kept coming back. They stood in silence again, not because they didn't know what to say, but because sometimes silence is the best answer to shared pain. Inside the house, Ethan called out, Dad, come see what I drew. Luke smiled. Duty calls. As he turned to leave the barn, Clara reached out and gently touched his arm. Thank you for telling me. Luke looked down at her hand, then into her eyes. Thank you for listening. Later that evening, after dinner and dishes and stories by the fire, Clara stayed longer than usual. Ethan showed her his sketch of Hope and labeled it Our Mustang. The word our made her pause. Luke noticed. You're part of this now, he said, his voice low, rough like gravel warmed in the sun. Whether you planned to be or not, she didn't answer. But when she left that night, she looked back before driving off, and her eyes were softer than ever before. It started like any other morning. Frost on the grass, a pot of coffee percolating on the stove, and Ethan tapping his fingers to a quiet rhythm as he waited for his father to pour cereal. The house smelled of wood smoke and oats, familiar, comforting. Then the knock came, 3 short raps on the front door, firm, intentional. Luke wiped his hands on a dish towel and crossed the room, his gut tightening with a strange unease. Folks out here didn't knock like that. They hollered from the gate or called your name from the porch. Knocking was for strangers. He opened the door slowly. The man standing there was in his mid-40s, tall and polished, his black wool coat unwrinkled despite the cold breeze, shoes that had never touched mud, and a watch that gleamed beneath his cuff. "Can I help you?" Luke asked. The man smiled professionally. "I certainly hope so. I'm looking for someone, Clara Whitmore." Luke blinked. "What for?" "She left town unexpectedly. Her office hasn't heard from her in weeks. She missed meetings, events. She has responsibilities." Luke frowned. "You a friend?" "An associate," the man said. "I manage her personal legal affairs." Luke stepped halfway out onto the porch. "She didn't say anything about you?" "No," the man said. "I imagined she wouldn't." There was a beat of silence. Then the man added more gently, "She's not in any trouble. We're just trying to bring her home. She has an empire to run. This kind of vanishing act, it's uncharacteristic." Luke leaned on the doorframe. The word empire hung in the air like smoke. She didn't vanish, he said. She's been around, the man studied him. So she's here. Luke didn't answer. The man reached into his coat and pulled out a sleek folder. She's also the legal owner of a Mustang mare named Lady Gold, purchased and donated to a private sanctuary 3 years ago. That sanctuary has since closed. The horses were to be transferred. One went missing. He opened the folder, revealing a printed photo. Luke's stomach turned. It was Hope. He closed the door slowly, not slamming it, but with finality. The man didn't knock again. Inside, Ethan looked up from the table. "Dad?" Luke didn't answer. He walked past the kitchen, out the back door, and across the yard to the barn. Hope stood in her stall, calm, unbothered. She came to the gate. When he approached, nuzzled his hand. He stared at her, jaw clenched. Lady Gold, it sounded like something out of a fairy tale, too pretty for a horse that had fought her way through scrub and cold and fear to stand here today. Clara had known. She must have. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning she came back as if nothing had changed. Her hair was braided under her hood, cheeks pink from the wind. She smiled when she saw Luke near the corral. "Morning," she said. "I brought muffins." He didn't return the smile. "We had a visitor yesterday," he said. Clara stilled. Tall. Guy. Suit. Clean shoes. Said he worked for a Clara Whitmore. Her eyes darkened just slightly. "Said you owned Hope," he added. She said nothing. "I figured you might want to say something before I ask the next question." Clara stepped forward slowly, her voice steady but low. "I didn't come here to lie." "No." Luke folded his arms. "Then why didn't you tell me who you were?" She looked away. "Because people treat me differently when they find out. I didn't ask you for anything," he said. "Never even asked your last name." "I know." He waited. She drew in a breath. "My sister rescued Hope. She was obsessed with Mustangs. When she died, I didn't want the horses lost in a system that didn't care. I thought Hope had been placed with someone kind. When I saw her here," her voice caught. It felt like a piece of Lydia had survived. Luke's anger softened, but only slightly. "You still should have told me." "I wanted to," she said. "But then I saw you, Ethan, the way you cared for her, and She paused. "I didn't want to take anything away from that." Luke looked at her for a long time. "What happens now?" he asked. "I came today to ask if you'd let her go," Clara said. "To a new sanctuary. I'm funding, safer, better resources, more space." "No," she blinked. "You didn't even think about it." "I did," he said, "all night, and my answer is still no." "Why?" "Because she's not just a horse to my son. She's not just some legacy of your sister. She's family. Now, we didn't find her. She found us." Clara looked away. Her jaw clenched, and Luke could tell the conversation hurt her more than she was letting on. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I believe you." And somehow, that made it worse. The first morning Clara didn't show up. Luke didn't think much of it. She was busy, he told himself. Maybe had a meeting to catch, a phone call to return, or perhaps just needed a day of solitude. They hadn't parted on great terms, but that didn't mean she'd disappear. The second morning he began to wonder. The third, Ethan asked the question. Did she say she wasn't coming back? Luke paused mid-step, hay bale still in his arms, his back to the boy. "No," he said finally. "She didn't." Ethan sat by the fence in his chair, a blanket over his legs, his eyes following Hope as the Mustang trotted slowly around the pen. Her limp had faded. Her trust had deepened. But something in her manner had changed since Clara's last visit. Like she, too, was searching for a missing piece. She would have said goodbye. Ethan murmured. Luke set the bale down and turned to him. "Maybe she didn't know how," Ethan frowned. "That's dumb." Luke smiled faintly, sitting beside him on the bench. Yeah, it is. The truth was, he missed her. He missed the way she leaned on the fence post like she belonged there. The way her voice softened when she spoke to Ethan. The way she made coffee in his kitchen as if it were her own, humming melodies he never recognized but always remembered. He missed the way she made things feel a little less heavy. But pride was a heavy coat, and Luke had worn it too long to shrug it off easily. Clara hadn't lied, not exactly, but she hadn't trusted him enough to tell the truth either, and that somehow felt worse. That night, he found himself staring at the mug in the dish rack, still there, unused. He didn't move it. Days passed. The routine returned, chores, feedings, therapy calls, the occasional trip into town. Luke turned inward. He fixed things that didn't need fixing, repaired fences that weren't broken, sharpened tools already sharp. Ethan grew quieter. The boy still laughed, still sketched in his notebook, still greeted Hope each morning with an apple and a grin, but the light behind his eyes had dimmed, and Luke noticed, one night as the wind howled through the eaves and frost crept along the windows like vines, Luke found Ethan in the living room, staring at the fire. "Can I ask you something?" The boy said. "Anything. Did you like her?" Luke didn't pretend to misunderstand. He sat down on the floor beside the couch, stretching his legs toward the warmth. "Yeah," he said softly. "I did." "Are you mad at her?" Luke thought for a long moment. "I was, a little, but not anymore." Ethan nodded. "You should tell her." "I don't know where she is. She left a phone number in the napkin drawer." Luke turned, startled. "What?" Ethan gave him a sheepish smile. "She said it was in case of an emergency. I figured this counts." Luke rose, went into the kitchen and opened the drawer. Tucked beneath a stack of paper napkins was a small slip of paper, her handwriting neat and elegant. He stared at the number, heart-pounding. He didn't call. Not that night, but he folded the paper and slipped it into his wallet just in case. A week passed before the first snow fell. Hope had begun responding to verbal cues, following simple commands. Luke had built a small, ramped platform for Ethan to practice mounting again. Each day, they worked together, slowly, patiently. The trust between boy and horse was undeniable. Hope nuzzled his shoulder, leaned into his touch. But Clara's absence hovered like a shadow. It clung to the house, the barn, the space where her truck used to park. Even Hope seemed to feel it, her ears perking at the sound of every engine passing on the distant road, then falling flat again. One night, as Luke closed the barn, he paused by the corral and looked out across the white, dusted field. The stars were sharp and cold, and the wind carried the scent of pine and something fainter, something like memory. He leaned on the fence and whispered to the dark, "I miss you." Not loud, not for anyone but himself. Hope shifted behind him, nickering, softly as if in agreement. The wind had softened since the snow. Days were now cold but calm, skies clear and sharp as polished glass. Luke had learned to welcome the silence, though not without effort. It filled the house like a visitor who refused to leave. Gentle, patient, and impossible to ignore. Ethan, as usual, rose early. He had developed a habit of wheeling out to the barn before breakfast, whispering greetings to Hope and humming softly as he checked her water and hay. It was a ritual now, something sacred between boy and horse, but this morning he came back inside with something else. "Dad!" He called from the doorway, holding a weathered envelope in his hand. This was under Hope's saddle blanket. Luke looked up from the sink, startled. His heart caught before his breath did. The envelope had his name on it. Luke. Written in handwriting he'd memorized without realizing. Clean, curved, unmistakably Clara's. He dried his hands and took the letter. His fingers hesitated before opening it, as if afraid of what the words might take back. Or worse, what they might still mean. Ethan didn't ask questions. He simply returned to the kitchen table, pulling his bowl of cereal closer, as if somehow, knowing this was something his father needed to do alone. Luke stepped onto the porch, the cold biting at his face as he unfolded the paper. "Luke, I didn't know how to say goodbye. I'm not sure I ever learned how. Maybe that's why I'm writing this instead of standing in front of you. I thought I came here to disappear for a while, to grieve quietly, to rest. But then I found a horse, and a boy, and a man who spoke less than most, but meant more than he. Realized I should have told you who I was, not because I thought you'd treat me differently, but because I wanted you to trust me, and trust can't grow where honesty hasn't been planted. I'm sorry for how I left. I'm sorry for what I couldn't say. You told me once that some things don't get lighter, we just learn to carry them better. I've been carrying guilt for a long time, Luke. But meeting you, meeting Ethan, watching you both with hope, it reminded me that healing isn't something we do alone. If I can come back, I will. If you can forgive me, I hope you will. Clara. Read the letter twice, then again, and each time something inside his chest loosened, not all at once, but like a knot that had begun to unravel, not from force, but from gentleness. He folded the letter carefully, tucked it into his coat pocket, and went inside. Ethan looked up, eyes searching. Luke didn't say much, just nodded. "She left it for you," Ethan said. "So she must have wanted you to know." Luke sat beside him at the table, the scent of cinnamon and wood smoke wrapping around them. "She said she might come back," he murmured. "She should." Luke gave a half-smile. "You really liked her, huh?" Ethan nodded. "She made things. It feel different, but good different." "Yeah," Luke said. "She did." After breakfast, they went out to the barn together. Hope perked up at their arrival, her ears twitching forward. Luke walked slowly to her side, ran a hand down her neck. "You miss her too," he whispered. Hope huffed a warm breath against his shoulder. Later that afternoon, Luke sat at the kitchen table. The letter opened beside him, and took out a pen. He hadn't written a personal letter in years. It felt unfamiliar, awkward at first, like trying on a jacket that didn't quite fit anymore. But then the words came. "Clara, I got your letter. Thank you. You didn't owe me anything, but I'm glad. You left something, Ethan found it, which he seems to think was fate. He's been saying you'd come back since the moment you left. You were right. We don't heal alone. I've learned that the hard way, but I'm learning it still. If you ever decide you're ready to come back, there's a place for you here, not just as a visitor, but as someone who belongs." Luke. He sealed the envelope, addressed it to the number on the slip still tucked in his wallet, and walked it down to the mailbox himself. That evening, Ethan sat by the fire, sketching again. This time, it was Hope standing between two figures, one tall, one seated, and a third figure walking toward them from the horizon. He held it up. "You think she'll come back?" he asked. Luke looked at the drawing, then at his son. "I hope so." The news spread faster than the snowmelt in spring. It started with the shiny black SUV that rolled through town early that morning, sleek, silent, and out of place among the rusted pickups and salt-stained sedans. Then came the whispers at the diner, the raised eyebrows at the post office, and the ringing phones at the feed store. Clara Whitmore was back, not the mysterious woman with the tired eyes and borrowed coat. Not the stranger who helped wash dishes in Luke's kitchen. No, this time she returned as herself, the billionaire heiress, the businesswoman, the one who vanished. Luke heard about it from Debbie at the general store. "She's staying at the old inn," Debbie said, eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and curiosity. "Booked the whole top floor, had flowers delivered, even tipped the bellboy $100. Can you believe that?" Luke gave a non-committal grunt. "She asked about me," he added, trying to sound casual. Debbie grinned. "Not in so many words, but she left this." She handed him a small envelope with his name on it. His breath caught before he opened it. I'm back, not for the press, not for damage control, for you, for Ethan, and for hope. If there's still space for me in that corral of yours, let me know. I'll be waiting. See, Luke folded the note and slipped it into his coat pocket, where Clara's first letter still lived. Later that afternoon, the Whitmore name made it onto the local news. A reporter from Denver had driven down, eager to catch a glimpse of the elusive heiress on her small-town retreat. They parked outside the inn, snapping photos of windows and porches, interviewing locals with too much time and too few secrets. But Clara didn't show, not until that evening. Luke was in the barn, brushing down Hope under the low, golden light of sunset, when he heard the crunch of tires in the driveway. He didn't turn right away. He didn't need to. "Nice night, Clara," said behind him. He glanced over his shoulder. She wore jeans. A wool sweater. Her hair was braided down her back. No bodyguards, no entourage, just her. "You stirred up the town," Luke said. She winced. "That wasn't my plan." "You bring a news crew?" "No. They followed me. I didn't invite them." He nodded once, then kept brushing. Clara stepped closer, her voice lower now. "I got your letter." Luke paused. "I figured. I meant what I wrote," she said. "I came back for the right reasons this time." Luke looked at her, eyes searching. "And what reasons are those?" She didn't flinch. "Hope, Ethan, you." Silence stretched between them, full and heavy but not painful. Behind them, Hope huffed gently and nudged Luke's shoulder, as if to say, "She's all right. She remembers you," Luke said. "I remember her too," Clara said. "She was the only thing Lydia could talk about those last few months. Said the horse knew when she was hurting." Luke turned toward her. "Maybe that's why she came here." "Maybe," Clara said. "Or maybe she came to lead me back." They stood together by the stall, close now, the kind of closeness born from shared truths and unspoken understanding. "Ethan's inside," Luke said. "He'll want to see you." Clara nodded but hesitated. "Do you think he'll be mad?" Luke smiled. "He thinks you walk on air." She laughed, and it was a sound that hadn't been heard in that barn for weeks. It bounced off the walls like sunlight. Inside, Ethan was already at the door when they walked up. His face lit up like the first day of spring. "You're back!" he shouted, rolling toward her. Clara crouched to meet him, her eyes bright with emotion. "I missed you, cowboy." "I knew you'd come back," he said. She smiled. "How?" "Because you didn't say goodbye, and people only do that when they're planning on coming back." Luke watched from behind, heart swelling. For all the noise outside, for all the attention her name brought in this house, Clara Whitmore wasn't a billionaire. She was someone who left a mug in the dish rack and a gap in their hearts when she left. Later that night, after dinner, and laughter and stories shared under firelight, Clara helped Ethan into bed. She came back down to find Luke on the porch, watching the moon rise. "I still don't know how to fit here," she said quietly, settling beside him. "You don't have to fit," Luke said. "You just have to stay." They called it the Ranch of Hope. The name wasn't planned. It wasn't printed on a banner or engraved on a sign. It began as a quiet joke, something Ethan said while sketching horses under the cottonwood tree. "This place," he told Clara, "feels like hope." She had smiled then, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and said softly, "Then that's what we'll call it." By mid-January, the word had spread beyond the fences. The local paper ran a story. "Billionaire heiress funds therapeutic. Ranch for disabled kids." A few weeks later, a news crew filmed a segment for the evening broadcast. Then came the letters. Then came the people. But it didn't feel like a spectacle. Because Luke wouldn't let it. He insisted on keeping things small, slow, personal. No grand opening, no speeches. Just a Saturday morning with 3 local kids, a borrowed wheelchair ramp, and the first ride around the ring. Clara funded it all quietly. Materials, staff, insurance. But she let Luke and Ethan be the heart of Yet on that first morning, Luke stood at the center of the small round pen, Hope standing beside him, reins loose and calm. Ethan waited nearby in his chair, grinning from ear to ear as the first rider approached, a girl named Rosie, 7 years, old with a nervous father and a cautious gait. Rosie had cerebral palsy. Her mother said she had never ridden a horse. Her doctors said she shouldn't. But Rosie had eyes like fire and dreams that didn't listen to limits. Clara helped lift the girl onto Hope's back, guiding her gently as Luke steadied the saddle. "You ready?" Luke asked. Rosie nodded fiercely. "I was born ready." Hope took a step, then another, then a full circle around the pen. The girl's laughter pierced the morning like sunlight, bright, unrestrained, contagious. Her father wept quietly at the fence. Her mother covered her mouth with both hands. Clara stood beside Ethan, who was drawing every moment. "Think she'll want to come back?" Clara asked. Ethan didn't look up. "She'll never want to leave." That afternoon, more families came, some from town, some from the next county over. No one asked about Clara's last name. No one cared. They cared about how she knelt to tie a child's bootlace. They cared about how she remembered names. They cared about the way she looked at their children and didn't see limitations, only possibility. In the days that followed, the ranch transformed. Volunteers arrived, donations came in, someone painted the old barn red again. A carpenter from town built a sturdy, accessible deck beside the pen. A retired teacher offered to run reading sessions on rainy days, and the kids, so many kids, kept coming. Some walked with canes, some wheeled themselves forward, some didn't speak at all. But they all connected, with Hope, with the other, horses with one another. Luke watched it all unfold, equal parts amazed and cautious. The ranch had once been quiet, his own private refuge. Now it was buzzing with life, laughter, movement, change. But it didn't feel like he was losing something. It felt like he was finally sharing it. One night, after the last family left and the barn lights were dimmed, Luke and Clara sat on the porch with Ethan between them, sipping cocoa and watching the stars blink into place. "You did a good thing," Luke said quietly. Clara shook her head. "We did." Ethan leaned back. "Hope did the most." They laughed, and Luke nodded. "You might be right." There was a pause then, a gentle hush of wind and wood creaking, the kind of silence that held something important. "I've been thinking," Clara said. Luke glanced over. "That's dangerous," she smiled. "About staying." Luke's chest tightened, not with fear, but with something dangerously close to hope. "I don't mean forever," Clara added. "Not yet, but I don't want this to be temporary anymore." Ethan's voice was soft. "We don't want it to be either." She looked at Luke. "Are you sure you're okay sharing all this?" He looked at the barn, at the ring, at the moonlit corral where Hope rested, calm and content. "I think, for the first time, I'm more than okay with it." She reached for his hand then, simple, natural, and he took it. And for the first time since Jenna passed, Luke didn't feel like he was betraying the past. He felt like he was honoring it by finally letting himself live again. Spring arrived without announcement. No fanfare, just the quiet unfolding of green over brown. The air warmed, the fields softened, wildflowers returned like shy guests to a long-abandoned party. And with them came the joy that only comes when winter has truly passed. The ranch had never looked better. The old barn, once weary and quiet, now buzzed with life, kids giggling over grooming brushes, horses stomping playfully, volunteers swapping stories over coffee near the gate. Hope had become a legend among the children, patient, gentle, almost magical. And Luke, he had changed too, in ways that didn't show up in mirrors, but were felt in how he carried himself. His shoulders were no longer burdened by what-ifs. His laughter came more easily. He said yes more than he used to. He said yes to staying up late with Ethan to watch the stars. He said yes to letting strangers become family. He said yes to love again. Clara had never moved in, not officially, but her books lived on the shelf beside the fireplace, and her boots sat by the door next to Ethan's sneakers and Luke's work shoes. Her coat had a hook, her smile had a place, her heart had a home. And on a Saturday in late April, something quietly wonderful happened. It wasn't a wedding, not in the traditional sense. There were no rings, no vows, no guests in formal wear, just a picnic table under the cottonwood tree, Hope grazing nearby, and Ethan presenting them with something he'd made by hand, a folded piece of cardstock, carefully colored in crayon. On the front, in Ethan's neatest handwriting, were the words, "We're a team now." Inside the card were 3 stick figures, one tall, one in a wheelchair, and one with a braid, all holding hands under a sun with a smiling face. Clara teared up before she even opened it fully. Luke knelt beside his son, kissed the top of his head, and looked up at Clara with a smile that needed no explanation. "We're not perfect," he said, "but we're real. And I think that's better." She nodded, blinking back tears. "I wouldn't trade this for anything." They hugged then, the kind of embrace that doesn't end, just changes form as the years go on. Later that evening, as dusk settled over the ranch and the lanterns flickered along the barn posts, Clara stood on the porch, watching the kids clean out the stalls and laugh over spilled buckets. Luke stepped beside her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "You ever think this place would become what it is?" she asked. Luke shook his head. "I thought it'd always be mine and Ethan's little corner of nowhere." And now? He looked out, over the pasture, where Hope stood tall and calm, her coat shimmering in the low light. Now it's everybody's corner, and it's better that way. They sipped in silence for a while. Then Clara said almost playfully, "You know, you never actually proposed." Luke raised a brow. "Are we supposed to do that?" She laughed. "I don't know, but it feels like something people do." He set down his mug, reached into his back pocket, and pulled out something folded. It wasn't a ring. It was a napkin, old, creased and familiar. On it, scrawled in Ethan's handwriting from months ago, were the words, "Come visit Hope again soon." Luke held it out to her with a grin. "You kept coming back. That counts for something." Clara took the napkin, smiled down at it like it was gold. "It counts for everything." The stars blinked above them. The wind carried laughter from the barn. Hope neighed once, low and content. Luke reached for Clara's hand, threaded his fingers through hers. "I don't need a wedding," he said. "Neither do I. I just need mornings with you, evenings with Ethan, and this ranch full of muddy boots and second chances." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then we already have everything." Months later, in the golden breath of summer, a sign appeared at the entrance to the ranch, painted by hand, crooked in the most endearing way. It read, "Mallory Ranch, where hope lives." Below it, in smaller letters, a simple note, "Open to all, especially the ones who need it most." And people came, not because of the name on the checkbook, not because of the story in the newspaper, but because somewhere along the way, the ranch became more than a place. It became a promise that no one is too broken, too lost, or too late to find their way home. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? And what part of this story touched your heart the most? If you enjoy meaningful stories like this one, stories that remind us of the beauty in everyday kindness and quiet courage, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Your support truly helps us keep sharing tales that matter. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Until next time, take care and never stop believing in second chances.